Welcome back to part 4 of our series where we are basically building a trading strategy for our trading robot. So in the previous video, we talked about generating indicators, right? So we want to be using 2 indicators in our particular strategy. That is the SMA 50 and then the SMA 200. So we talked a little bit about getting those indicator calculated. And then also we discussed how we can generate signals from these different indicators using the set indicator signal compare method. So this will allow us to compare 2 different indicators and using that as a signal generation technique. So either for buying or selling a stock. So now that we have an understanding of indicators and signals, we are now going to move on to the trade objects. So we're going to talk about how to build trades and define what those orders look like, and then talk about some of the caveats when it comes to pre and post market trading versus regular market trading. So just an FYI, it is Saturday. And so we can't actually submit the orders right now because they're all market orders, but we can talk through a little bit about how that's going to look. So let's get started. All right, so let's start from here. We're gonna delete this line that was just printing out the stock data frame with the indicator columns added to it, just so visually we can see it. What we're gonna do next is we're now going to create a new trade object. Now, this is a template that I provide individuals inside the Python robot library. And the idea behind it is it's gonna help you build your order from scratch, right? But it's trying to do it in a meaningful fashion where if you want to ask certain questions or if you want to use certain terminology, ideally what that would then do is it's going to build your order in such a way that it's going to be able to infer what you mean when you're talking about things like, hey, I want to add an instrument to my order, or I want to go long for this position. It's going to use terminology like that and then set it up in such a way where it's basically taking that information into consideration. So let's create a new, not that one. I want to do that. So we're going to do a new long trade. And so in this situation, we're going to do trading robot create trade. And there's a couple different arguments you need to pass through. So the first one is going to be your trade ID. This is a unique identifier that you can attach to a trade before it's been submitted, right? So the idea behind this is there might be multiple trades that you're going to define beforehand, and you might want to be able to uniquely identify each one of those trades. Well, in that situation, you could leverage the trade ID argument in order to identify the trade that you might want to modify before you actually submit it, because you have, say, new information that you want to take into consideration. So we're going to give it a trade ID. It can be anything you want. In this case, we're just going to do long enter. We're going to have an enter or exit argument. So are you entering a position or are you exiting a position? In this situation, we're entering a position. And then are you going long or short? Well, in this situation, we're going to be going long. So we're going to basically be buying a position to open up a new one, right? So we're buying some instrument to enter a new position. So we have those 2 arguments defined. Additionally, there is an order type argument. So this one can be one of the different options here. So I do have a few: market, limit, stop, stop limit, and then trailing stop as well. Now in this situation, it will default to market. And then depending on which order type you specify, you might be able to set a couple other arguments, things like price, right? So if you're specifying a stop, we need to know what that stop price is. Now, if you don't define it here, you can define it later down the road, but naturally you want to try to do it as early as possible if it makes sense. In this situation, we're going to be doing a market order. So we now have a long trade, so a new long trade. We're now going to add a leg to that trade, right? So now we're going to go into that order leg collection. So we're going to add an order leg. In this situation, we're going to do new long trade. There is an instrument method where we can specify the instrument we want to trade. And so in this situation, we're going to have symbol. Sorry, it's a little bit cold this morning, so I have my jacket on. And I feel like I have to clear my throat all the time now. So we need to define our trading symbol. I'm just leveraging the one that we defined up above. It's going to be fuel cell in this situation. And then from here, we're going to do a quantity. Now, because I'm doing live actual trading, I don't want very large quantities, especially when I'm testing out my strategy. So I try to take the bare minimum quantity possible, unless, again, your strategy for some specific reason needs to do a certain quantity. Now, in this situation, again, I always push people, if possible, do paper trading before you do actual trading. And if you do actual trading, try to start as small as possible when trading. Now, from here, we're going to do quantity of 1 share. In this situation, we need the asset type. That's also going to be equity. Now, some people ask, hey, Alex, like, that's great. You're giving me a starting point, but what if I want to change like the actual raw JSON that I'm about to submit? You can always do that. So never feel like you cannot modify the raw JSON. If you want, you would go to new long trade. And if you go to the order property, that will bring up the raw JSON that would actually be submitted. So you always, at the end of the day, you always have control to modify the underlying JSON. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help make that process a little bit easier when it comes to modifying different parts of that JSON. So that way it helps guide you through the process. So again, at the end of the day, you have ultimate control over it, but I do have some methods pre-built for you. So that way building that raw JSON doesn't seem as tedious or painful. Okay, so we added an order leg. That's awesome. What I'm going to show you next is what that order looks like. So I'm going to use pretty print and then do it again. And then I'm going to do new, long, trade, and then order. Let's see what this looks like. So now you can see we have a very simple market order that is all filled out by specifying the method. So again, it's trying to make the process of building this JSON structure a little bit easier and less prone to error. I know a lot of times people will send me order examples and they're saying, hey, Alex, it's not submitting it. What's wrong with it? It's almost always something little. It's always something like, hey, instead of, capitalizing buy, you gave it all lowercase. And then you're like, oh, it's something stupid like that, right? So it's always little things like that I notice. So I try to make that process easier by giving you a template to build off of. Okay, so that's defining our new long trade. So this is what we would use in order to enter a position if we were given a buy signal with our indicator. So what we're going to do next is we're going to define our exit order as well. So in this one, I'm just going to put a little note here to say create a new strategy for entering a position. We're now going to basically do the same exact thing here. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one that is for exiting a position. So leaving a trade. And then we're going to do here long exit. So we're not going short or anything like that. We're still going long. So in this situation, we're taking our long position and we would be exiting it. So it's still going to be a market order in this situation. This is all pretty much identical as well. My goal is to actually write something where you could give me an existing order and then do what we would call flip it, or at least that's what I'm calling it, is like basically flipping the direction. So if you were going long and you wanted to go if you wanted to enter a position and then you wanted to exit, the idea behind it is you could give me an existing trade. And then if you change like the argument like this, it would go through and change all the different parts that needed to be changed in that situation, which in the most part, for a market order, it's basically just selling instead of buying. But the idea is, again, trying to make it where you have to write as little code as possible to get the order you want. So in this situation, everything here is going to stay pretty much exactly the same. We're just now exiting. And then again, I am specifying a new trade ID. Now, if you, again, want to take a look at it. Oh, actually here, we need to actually change it a little bit. So we're going to do new exit trade, new exit trade. And then again, if you want to grab that raw order JSON, you would just do the order property, and then you're going to get something like this. So you can see now, instead of being a buy, it's now a sell. So it did exactly what we wanted it to do. So that's how we build orders. Again, at the end of the day, you don't technically need to use this. This is just designed to make that process a little bit easier. There's no reason why you couldn't necessarily, generate a new order or something like that, and then pass through the actual raw JSON through something like that. So I will give that flexibility as well, where if you don't even want to use the template, you don't have to. What you could do is you could just say, hey, here's my trade object. Here's the order I generated. So again, trying to make it where it's flexible and makes your life a little bit easier. Now, something I do want to show as well, just in case you need to store these orders before you submit them or something like that, because a lot of times you might want to keep a catalog of the orders that you're building. This is how you could do it. So we'll say save the orders, right? So we're going to say with open, and then it's going to be file equals order strategies. I don't know why I can't spell today. And then the mode would be write plus. So if it's W plus, it's going to create a new file if it doesn't already exist. We're going to give it an alias name, and then I'm going to call JSON dump. So this will dump everything here. Now, this one I'm going to do a little bit different. I'm going to initialize a list. I'm going to take my new long trade. I have a toDictionary method inside of it. So again, if you want to easily convert it to a dictionary, you could. And then I'm going to do toDictionary for my exit trade as well. The whole purpose of this again is really just to make it where if you need to save it before you actually submit it, then you could. Now, in this situation, we're going to create a new function called default. This is going to handle some objects where if we can't dump them to JSON, it's going to handle those situations. So it's going to do something like convert the TD object to make it easier. So what I'm actually going to do is I actually have some code earlier that I didn't write. So I'm going to create a new function called default. In this situation, it's going to take an object of some type. I don't know what it is. And then we're going to check the instance of that object. So we're going to see what kind of object it is. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be seeing if it's a TD client object, because technically when you initialize an order, I do have a property in there that represents the TD client library. This is, again, just more for managing the different aspects like posting orders, modifying orders, and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to return that object, but we're going to put it as a string. The reason why is we cannot dump a TD client object to a JSON file. So I also need to do one final import that I skipped ahead that I didn't want to do. So I'm going to do from TD client, import TD client. So all this is going to do is when I dump these orders to the JSON file, when we convert it to a dictionary, it's going to have a TD client object as part of that dictionary. We need to then take that TD client object and make it where we can dump it into a JSON file. So we need to be able to serialize it. And basically what will happen is if we use this function, it will take that TD client object and it's going to convert it to a string. So it'll make a little bit more sense when you see it. Okay, so you can see it dumped everything in here. And then you can also see that everything has been dumped to a JSON file. So again, it has other things in here as well. So certain properties about that particular object. So this way you could, in theory, you could load it into an existing one. I'm still kind of working out the kinks of that, but the idea behind it is you could actually generate everything you need from this and then do everything. So you can see that order property is here as well. You can see that the price, the stop price, all the different properties about that particular object has now been stored in a JSON file. So again, the idea is it's trying to make it easier for you if you wanted to load it potentially down the road. So that's just a little thing I wanted to share in case you need some mechanism to save the orders before you actually submit them, then you can. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about, well, there's probably like two more things we're going to talk about, and then I'm going to cut off the video. And then in the next one, we're going to be actually talking about running the script. That's the trading dictionary. And so this is a way that I basically try to organize everything. So that way, as we're trying to look for signals, and then based on those signals, if we get something where we need to do some type of trigger like buy or sell something, it's all kind of organized in an easy dictionary where I can just navigate to the part that I need and then pass it through to the different functions that call for that piece of information. So let's do this. Let's define a trading dictionary. Again, bear with me. I'm going to create a new variable called it trades dictionary. And then I'm going to have each key be a trading symbol. Now in this situation, because I only have one, I don't have to do anything fancy like fill it out using a loop. So again, we're starting with simple examples and then we'll go to more complicated ones. So I'm going to define this trading dictionary. It's going to have a single symbol in it. And then inside of there, we're going to have certain information for the buys and we're going to have certain information for the sells. Now with the buys, like pretty much anything, it's going to have two components. It's going to have a trade function. So this is the actual trade that we want to submit. That's going to equal the trading robot. There is a trades collection that's part of it. And then if I grab the ID of the trade, then I can specify it. So now I'm storing it and saying, okay, for fuel cell, when we get a buy, here's the trade function you need to submit. So again, the idea is that we've organized it. And then we're going to give the trade ID. Again, it's going to be trading robot. It's going to be trades. And then it's going to be long enter. And then from here, it's going to be the trade ID. So again, just different pieces of information. You could grab other things and you could add stuff to it and all sorts of different stuff like that. It's really up to you how you want to do it. But just note that it's there for you. And you can kind of organize this however you want. Now this one, we're going to change some information about. This time it's long exit. This one, it's going to be long exit as well. Okay. Now there's other things in here that I technically have separated. So one is called like ownership. Technically, I could also put it in here, but for right now, I'm putting it in a separate one. So I have this another dictionary called ownership. So define ownership. This is more, again, when we're looping and we just need to change ownership status kind of relatively quickly and be able to relatively quickly look it up. This is kind of an easy way of doing it. So we're going to do ownership dictionary. It's going to equal a dictionary. It's going to have the trading symbol as the key. And then again, false. Now, again, I could technically put this in this one as well. There's really no reason stopping me for doing that. But when I was kind of just building it, I did it like this. But I would say probably long term, I would want to put it in here just to keep everything in one simple location. And then from here, we're going to initialize a variable called order. So a order variable. This is just something where it'll make a little bit more sense as we're running through the loop, but we can actually check the status of the order. And then just to make sure I don't have a little bug that pops up or a little IntelliSense error, I just initialize it. Okay, again, this will be used to check the order status. Alrighty, so at this point, I think I've done enough for this video. Yeah, 18 minutes is long enough. So if you have any questions about building the actual trading object, feel free to put those down in the comments below. Also, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. We always love new subscribers. And if you want to leverage this code yourself, also make sure to follow me on GitHub. I have a bunch of different repositories there. So all the code that I use in my videos, I post to GitHub. And then also some code I will be posting to my Facebook group, but that's more specifically for VBA usually. But yeah, again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them down in the comments below. Otherwise, we will see you in video number 5.